Hello, my name is Wendy Barden, and I serve as Music Education Specialist in Professional Development and Resource Programs at Purpose Center for Arts Education. I'm here to support the work of music educators across Minnesota in any way I can. Please don't hesitate to send an email if you have a question or if there's another way you think I might be able to help. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I will introduce you to lesson and resource ideas available for intentionally addressing social-emotional learning through your music curriculum. Takeaways for this presentation: I hope you'll have a growing understanding of social-emotional learning, that you'll take away teaching strategies and resources you can use in your classroom, and there'll be lots of new-to-you listening ideas. The resources I'll be highlighting can be accessed on the Purpose Center website, Music Education Specialist page. Take a look at this table of contents. All of the lesson resources I'm sharing today are listed here, along with suggested grade levels, whether or not internet is required, and an I can statement. I'm not an expert on social-emotional learning, but this presentation is based on 3 resources I've found valuable in my own learning. First, check out the CASEL.org website and the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. While CEL has received more attention over the last few years, this organization has been around since 1994. Second, Scott Edgar's book, Music Education and Social Emotional Learning, The Heart of Teaching Music, is very informative and has lots of examples from the music room. And the third resource, by Scott Edgar and his wife Stephanie, is a beautifully illustrated alphabet book that pairs complex emotions and masterworks. So, what is social-emotional learning? Well, according to the CASEL organization, social-emotional learning has more facets than just asking students, "How are you doing today?" At a very basic description, social-emotional learning is the process through which we, meaning adults and students, recognize and manage emotions, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, make responsible and caring decisions, and it also includes acquiring and applying knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and setting and achieving personal and collective goals. Social-emotional learning really involves educating the whole child. And social-emotional learning is for everyone. Today we are focusing on the approximately 80% of students in our classrooms who are highly functioning and show relatively few signs of learning or behavioral difficulties. In addition, I want to recognize there is still another 10 to 20% of students who need the support of highly trained mental health professionals, such as your school counselor, social worker, or psychologist. This image represents CASEL's social-emotional learning framework. It was updated just last year to pay closer attention to how CEL affirms the identities, strengths, and experiences of all children, including those who have been marginalized in our education systems. The framework has 5 components placed in the center of the image. In orange, self-awareness and self-management focus on self. In green, social awareness and relationship skills focus on others. And in yellow, there's responsible decision-making. These 5 components are important in the classroom, but also have a ripple effect through the entire school. They reach home to support families, and then across communities. This document comes from the CASEL website and gives much more detail to each component. You might pause this video for a moment to read what CASEL has identified students should know and be able to do for academic success, school and civic engagement, health and wellness, and fulfilling careers. Today, we will focus on elements of self and others that are circled in red. Watch for those headings throughout the presentation. I've provided you with a crosswalk between the new 2018 Minnesota Standards and Benchmarks in Music and opportunities to develop CASEL competencies. You might move around some of the X's I've placed, but my point is there are many opportunities to include self-awareness or self-management, social awareness or relationship skills in your music classroom. Certainly, students need to use these skills in music making, and that also means we need to teach them. Let's begin with students identifying their own emotions and thoughts. Very simply, what if students had a few minutes to stop and reflect on how or what they're feeling, and then what type of music or specific song, perhaps, they like to listen to when they feel that way? A couple particulars about this experience. There's a word bank, and many of the emotions are more complex than simply happy or sad. You can substitute any emotions you think are most appropriate for the age of your students, but again, I think a word bank can be really helpful. Then secondly, experiences throughout this presentation are shown as worksheets. That's the easiest way to share them with you, but not often the best way to use them with students. Feel free to break apart these pages, use chunks, put them in other formats, make them applicable and usable in your situation and for your students. The ABCs of My Feelings in Music makes possible connections between complex emotions and masterworks. The Edgars chose to limit the scope of their musical selections to Western art music. In the year 2021, limiting music examples to only Western art music likely excludes many students in our classes. Several music educators joined together to crowdsource suggestions of more diverse music to connect with the given emotions. I hope you'll check out the expanded database. It's a start. On this page, the questions for listening and strategies for sharing can be applied to any musical example. In the top section, the authors of the ABCs of My Feelings in Music suggest starting with the emotion and then think about how musical elements support that mood or feeling. The other approach is to start with the music and lead the discussion towards identifying a mood or feeling. Either way, students need vocabulary to describe what they hear. In the final section of this page, there are several ways students can share their thoughts and observations and ideas. Especially notice different structures for working with a partner or in small groups. We'll look at 3 of those structures more closely. I call these pages touch charts. Students, or pairs of students, can listen to a musical excerpt and describe it by touching or choosing one emoji from the page on the left and 2 words from the page of elements. It would be a good idea to limit the words or choices on the pages depending on the age of your students. Or make a set of cards that students can choose from, either English words or music terms and symbols. The listener's Foursquare experience is intended for students to work in small groups and to listen to an excerpt at least 3 times. After the first listening, the group discusses the feeling they get from the music. So what if you put the questions there on small pieces of paper and placed them in an envelope so students drew out one or more of the questions to discuss? After the second listening, the group makes an educated guess about the role and the context of the music. Again, could the groups draw some of the questions out of an envelope? And then finally, to listen a third time, each member of the group chooses one of the squares and listens only for that element. After they listen, the group shares what they heard. So here are some of the decisions I made in putting this Foursquare together. First, as you can see, I provided a word bank for each element. And I would do this for any age student, including some of my high school students. It's often that students can get mixed up with the categories of the words even when they've been hearing them for many years. Second, I used English words, but you could use music terms or symbols. And then finally, I chose to focus on the elements that are identified as expressive elements in our Minnesota standards and benchmarks. Those are tempo, dynamics, and articulation. I used these elements because students seem to have an easier time connecting them to mood and feeling. You certainly could rotate in other elements as well. The listener's Tic Tac Toe is a similar experience for older students. I might have them work in a group of 3, and yes, they are listening to an excerpt multiple times. The first time is focusing on mood and feeling. Once groups have thought about those initial questions, what if they combined with another group to have a bigger discussion? I might do that rather than call the class back together and try and discuss it as a large group. For the second listening, have the group choose one row, either across, up and down, or diagonal, and then each student in the group listens to and describes the element in only one box. In this example, notice the first 2 columns are elements, and the right column is performance skills. Here's another opportunity to think about feelings or emotions. What emotions might you experience if you were an astronaut about to begin a 2-month adventure on the International Space Station? Students can think about that question based on the playlist of SpaceX astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. Their selections were performed by AC/DC, the Blues Brothers, and the horn section of the United States Army Field Band. Finally, what's another musical selection that students would want to add to their playlist? Now, let's turn our attention to the social awareness component and focus on others. This includes taking others' perspectives, understanding others' strengths, and demonstrating empathy and compassion with others. Students young and old can share music with others. This experience grew out of the pandemic, and in particular, from the need we all had to connect with others when it was so challenging to do so. Who might need or who might appreciate hearing from you? What song or melody will you sing or play? How did it feel both for the listener and for the performer? There are many layers to the Stand By Me lesson, and again, it's okay to divide it up or do only sections of it. Let's start at the end of the second page because that's where we're headed. Think about what this song communicates or what it might make you think of. Who might you share this song with? Is there someone who needs your support? What could you do to let that person know that you are there for them? And who do you want or need standing by you, supporting you? Now watch 4 different performances for different audiences and different purposes. The first one, learn a little bit about the song's history and watch Ben E. King sing his song on American Bandstand. Students might ask a grandparent or another older adult if they remember that show or what other songs they remember from their teen years. The second performance is musicians from all over the world performing on behalf of Playing for Change. Third, watch a casual performance that took place in New York City's Central Park. And then finally, watch the performance by the Kingdom Choir at the royal wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. At the end, have students revisit our initial questions. Put on your thinking caps. What other songs could you use in a similar way? This lesson is based on Danzón No. 2 by Mexican composer Arturo Marquez. The lesson begins with brief bio information, and then there's a listening map to accompany a performance. Notice the sections highlighted in blue are more calm, red sections are more agitated and excited, and then purple represents a mood that's in between. There are various open-ended questions, and students are instructed to respond to 5 of their choice. Do you know Le Chevalier de Saint-Georges? He was an amazing performer, composer, conductor, leader, and champion fencer whose parents happened to be a wealthy French plantation owner and a slave. He was born on a Caribbean island, and his family moved to France when he was a child. He made significant contributions to the musical life and culture of France in the late 1700s. He was a contemporary of Mozart, but we know little about him. Resources included in this lesson are extensive biographical information, discussion questions, and various performances to view in an option A for younger students and option B for secondary students. This final listening lesson begins with a recollection of events that happened on September 11th, 2001. And then students listen to 2 of the many pieces written to commemorate that day. First, there's the first movement of a string quartet by Steve Reich titled WTC 911. He manipulated voice recordings of the air traffic controllers and first responders and used those in the piece. While he wasn't there at the time, Steve's apartment was located a mere 4 blocks from the World Trade Center. Contrast that with Freedom, written by Paul McCartney. It turns out that McCartney had been in New York City and witnessed the 9/11 crashes from the window of a plane waiting to take off from JFK Airport. 2 very different perspectives on that day. Let's switch back to the components of self-awareness and self-management. Those orange quadrants there, focusing on self. Through reflection and self-assessment, we can help students recognize their own strengths and limitations, engage in a growth mindset, and think about their interests and preferences. Exit tickets have been used for many years. They help students reflect on their learning, answering the question, what can I do well, and where might I need more help? And then they're also useful, exit tickets, as formative assessments to help inform teachers the next steps in our instruction. Here's a different kind of practice journal. Each day, when students are finished practicing, have them choose 1 square to complete. This form of reflection comes from the beginning string method, String Basics. Students are to read each statement and circle the response that best describes their achievement. For example, Number 3, I play with correct bow hold. Students will circle all the time, sometimes, not sure, or no. This may or may not match with our observations, and either way, students' responses can give us good information that informs next steps in our teaching. Perhaps you saw the set of short improvisation experiences that we created during the pandemic. There's a set for recorder, one for strings, and one for band. Students listen to the tracks and then follow the instructions. Well, the point I wanted to make today is to ask students how they're feeling about improvisation and to encourage them to come back and take another turn. The more we improvise, of course, the more fun it gets and the more comfortable we feel making up our own music. Wow, who would have thought that self-assessment and assessment are part of social emotional learning? They can be. Self-assessment and assessment can help students identify their own strengths. Here we happen to be in an elementary general music class learning an accompaniment to a song that we're also singing. So what's our target? What does a good performance look like or sound like? Well, it has 4 elements. The notes are correct. The rhythm is correct with steady pulse. The technique is correct. And we begin and end together with the group. Using this checklist, students can assess their own performance and know what we're looking for in a formal assessment. There's no mystery. I would be sure to post this checklist on the wall for easy reference. Here's another example of students being able to assess their own work. This time, imagine a choir rehearsal, and every student is about to record their own voice using a phone or other digital recorder while the full choir is singing. Students should be used to your checklist, and of course the elements can change, but we want to make sure there's no more than 4 at one time. Today, we're listening for singing that's audible, pitches that are accurate to the assigned part, rhythm that is also accurate to the assigned part, and then breathing in the appropriate places. I'm a big fan of checklists, as you probably can tell. They're easy for both students and teachers to use, especially in formative assessments. Rubrics work too, of course, but that takes us to a discussion I'll save for another day. As students are reflecting on or assessing their own strengths and limitations, we want them to engage a growth mindset. How can we move students toward the right end of that line? I wish we were gathered in person so that we could share all of your good ideas. Some students will say, I'm not good at this. So, how can we turn that? What am I missing? I give up. I'll use some strategies that I've learned. This is too hard. This may take some time and effort to learn. I made a mistake. Mistakes help me improve. It's good enough. Is this really my best work? Focusing on growth mindset. How can we improve? We also want to prompt students to think about their interest and to develop preferences. One way to do that is to ask questions. When students are composing or improvising their own music, what dynamics are needed? How does changing the tempo affect the mood? What if... fill in the blank. What do you want the audience to hear? What do you think is the next thing that needs to be done? When perhaps elementary students are singing or playing instruments, what classroom instrument do you want to play this time? It's choice day. What song should we sing? Would you rather blank or blank? Do you think the music would sound more magical if we played it faster or higher? What order should these songs be in our program? And why? When students are deciding what they like to listen to, what favorite performance will you share? Which composer would you like to learn more about? Which do you like better, song A or song B? And why? Finally, here's a few ideas focused on showing self-discipline, setting personal and collective goals, and using planning and organizational skills. If you teach elementary music, you likely have classroom expectations posted on the wall, or a list of what it takes to be a good citizen in music class. Here are my 5. I give my best effort every day. I'm interested in learning about music that's new to me. Others can count on me to do my part when we make music in groups. I respect the instruments and other things we use. I show good audience etiquette when others perform. In this format, notice 2 things. First, students reflect on their work using descriptors such as independently and with occasional reminder, rather than something like excellent, their effort or their accomplishment is excellent or satisfactory or meets standard or needs improvement. Second, with both student reflection and teacher observation, the door is open for conversation. The only way a student can improve is with specific feedback. These forms identify 6 things that are expected of ensemble members, equally true in the President's Own Marine Band in Washington, D.C., or 6th grade bands in the Gopher State. There's a self-reflection form and a teacher observation form. On the teacher observation form, notice the words in blue. Those words come directly from the 2018 Minnesota benchmark number 5 in grades 6 or 8. Using a form like this one, students can set a goal for themselves at the beginning of rehearsal, a goal that's either musical, personal, or interpersonal, and then rate their level of achievement at the end of the rehearsal. And here's one final idea. How can you help students plan out a timeline for preparing a solo or small ensemble for a festival or contest, or to perform perhaps at their place of worship? This too is part of self-management in social emotional learning. I've left you with a lot of things to think about, or hopefully corroborated many teaching strategies you already use. Also, I hope you are taking away various sparks or resources to help you intentionally address social emotional learning in your music classroom. Thank you very much for your time and your interest. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send an email. Take care.